We'll start with this. In my previous videos, we've been talking a lot about Eddie Hearn's recent revelation that Katie's going to stay at 140 pounds. Katie Taylor, she's going to stay undisputed champion. She's going to stay up there. And as a result of that, she might vacate the titles she currently holds at 135. She's already vacated 2 of them, and it's conceivable that she'll vacate the other 2. We talked about the possibility of Dubois versus Ferreira via the IBF, Dixon versus Carbajal via the WBO, but what about the WBA? What happens to the WBA title? Via the WBA, Uruguay's Maira Moneo is ranked at number 1. She is interim champion. Great Britain's Rhiannon Dixon, she's ranked at number 2. At number 3 is Germany's own Dilar Kasikio.
Is that how you say that?
That's how I said it. And at number 4 is Great Britain's own Caroline Dubois. Because Maira Moneo is ranked at number 1, and because Eddie Hearn said that Rhiannon Dixon has another world title opportunity, another title that she can shoot for aside from the IBF title, it's not clear if he was talking about the WBO. He might have been. Could have been talking about the WBA.
Could have been, but the WBA title has not yet been vacated. The WBO, that one has been. So I get the impression that's the title he was talking about.
And that's the title that she might end up shooting for, the WBO title. But as it pertains to the WBA, Rhiannon is ranked at number 2, and Maira Moneo is ranked at number 1. Maira Moneo, who sports a professional record of 14 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 3 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 15 professional bouts. That 1 loss, that lone defeat, it's a DQ.
I don't even consider it a real loss. In my mind's eye, Maira's still an undefeated fighter.
May end up facing an undefeated fighter in her very next fight for what could be the newly vacated WBA title. It's just a question of which. Which undefeated fighter will she end up fighting? Will it end up being Rhiannon Dixon? Will it be Germany's own Dilar Kasikio?
Or will it be Caroline Dubois?
Whoever it is, whoever she ends up fighting, what you need to know about Maira is Maira's a mid-range to inside fighter, volume puncher, pressure.
She's a pressure fighter. Not as many bells and whistles as Caroline Dubois or Rhiannon Dixon or Beatrice Ferreira. She's a pressure fighter.
The more straightforward approach than the aforementioned fighters, and more pro experience than all the aforementioned fighters. More rounds in the bank, more fights overall than either Rhiannon Dixon, Caroline Dubois, Beatrice Ferreira, or Dilar Kasikio.
She's more experienced.
Though still very raw, still very crude, and rough around the edges. Gift and a curse, really. The pros and cons of Maira Moneo is that she's a volume puncher with a great engine, but her combinations, they're messy, they're very scrappy. She can often overshoot the distance, get her arms all tangled up with the other girls, end up in a clinch, not maintaining that bit of space between herself and the other girl. She'll end up not only smothering the other girl's work, but smothering her own because she's too far on the inside to get punches off.
It's messy, albeit very effective.
She can be a handful for these other girls. These less experienced fighters that maybe are a bit more nuanced and have more bells and whistles than Maira, but not more experience than Maira, and experience against fighters like Maira. Maira's no journeywoman.
That is primarily what Caroline Dubois and Rhiannon Dixon, I mean, those are the kind of fighters they've been keeping busy with so far, and I'm not complaining about that. I'm just saying they have yet to come up against somebody like Maira Moneo, somebody who can really push them and force them to work, force them to fight.
But I'm not sure they will be forced to deal with Maira just yet. I'm convinced that Rhiannon Dixon's probably going to end up fighting for the WBO title. Beatrice Ferreira, she'll end up fighting for the IBF. And Caroline Dubois, she might end up fighting for the WBC.
So who will Maira end up fighting?
Could end up fighting Germany's own Dilar Kasikio, who's ranked at number 3, ranked right behind Rhiannon Dixon, who's ranked at number 2.
Could happen that way.
Yet another fighter we have to acquaint ourselves with and get a closer look at, because the landscape at 135 is changing. The reset button is very close to being hit in this division after years of Katie Taylor ruling this division with an iron fist and bottlenecking all its fighters to her. She's moved up in weight and she's staying up there, which will open a door for a new crop of champions to sprout. Maira Moneo could be one among them. Maira Moneo, who fought 4 times in 2022, 2 times in 2023. I'm not sure if she's based out of Argentina, but many of her recent fights have been in Argentina. Having last seen action last month in December of last year, opposite the ring, Lisbeth Crespo. Whoever finds themselves so confronted with Maira next, they won't be facing an inactive fighter, a fighter that hasn't seen action in a while, and she's a live one. She's a handful. She's not as nuanced as some of these other fighters, but she is ranked number 1 by way of the WBA. Thus, somebody's going to have to deal with her, and we'll find out who does. Men's welterweight news, some interesting comments from Terence Crawford, who took to his social media to say, like I said before, Jaron Ennis had 2 opportunities to fight me. We're talking about a kid that's still fighting in the theater. Make it make sense.
You can't, because it doesn't come from a sensible place. It comes from an emotional one.
Didn't I tell you in a build-up of the Spence fight, and immediately afterwards, that all those Spence fans that were blowing smoke up everybody's ass about him, they're gonna start doing that about Boots, because what they want Boots to be is the anti-Crawford. But if what Boots really wanted was a Crawford fight, he would have been going the WBO route, not the IBF route. And that's what those eliminators were. The one with Custio Clayton, the more recent one with Roman Villa.
We've been all through that.
The bottom line is it's exactly how Terence Crawford says it is. Before Terence got his hands on Spence, Boots had the opportunity to get his hands on him, to line himself up for a Crawford fight. You don't wait until after the Spence fight.
You don't wait until after Spence activates his rematch clause to start acting like you want Terence Crawford. If you do, it's very obvious what you're doing.
You're clout chasing. You're selling wolf tickets. You're calling out a guy you know is busy so that people will think you want to fight him. And Jaron Ennis, he's not the only one that's been doing this.
Teofimo Lopez has been doing this.
To that, Terence said, and Teofimo Lopez, yo bitch ass better worry about them little guys that's on yo ass down there in yo weight class. It's crazy. Every time I see your hoe ass, you don't even look my way. But when you're in front of the camera, you've got so much to say. You're a pussy. Teofimo responded by saying, time will tell. You also need to focus on getting yourself out of that trapped contract you're in with Errol Spence Jr. and Al Heyman. See you at the top, brother. No sucker. Plead the 5th. Terence responded to that by saying, last I recall, you're the only one in a fucked up situation with Top Rank. Go cry me a river. No, real shit. Good luck in your next fight. Focus on him, because he can fight, and I don't want you to look bad worrying about me when you've got other problems on your hands.
Yeah, Teofimo's got to deal with Jermaine Ortiz real soon. That's what makes all this talk about fighting Crawford and moving up to fight Crawford. It's little more than wolf tickets. It's a bluff to get attention on Teofimo's next fight. Nobody believes him, at least I don't believe him.
You're calling guys out when they're unavailable, when you know they're unavailable. And the problem is, so does everybody else. You called out Matias when you knew he was injured, and you called out Crawford when you knew he's preoccupied with Spence. They've got to settle that situation. You brought it up yourself, that he's all tied up in a contract with Errol Spence and Al Heyman. And this is when you decide to call him out.
Well, you're booked to fight somebody else.
What the hell are you doing? Wasting everybody's time trying to pull a fast one. There's too much of this in the American boxing scene. I mean, I can tolerate a bit of trash talk for a fight that's actually made, but trash talk for the sake of trash talk, that's just a waste of time.
Yeah.
Terence was definitely getting a few knots off his chest via his own social media. The Ennis stuff, the Lopez stuff, the stuff about Spence and his cataracts. Terence said, last I can recall, we definitely get our eyes checked before every fight. I'm just saying, any boxer would know that, but casual fans will say and make up anything.
Yeah, but it's not casual fans saying it. It's Errol Spence Jr. himself saying it.
And the casual fans believe him because they don't know any better. Is that to suggest that he went into the Terence Crawford fight with cataracts? Well, what about the eye exam? They didn't find anything. According to Errol, the reason he got hit with all those jabs and all those hooks was due to the cataracts. But what about the eye exams?
And that's what Crawford's talking about. The fighters regularly get their eyes checked before a fight.
Like when the BBBOC did not allow Christina Lenardatu to box Michaela Mayer in the United Kingdom because she had some kind of eye issue. Terence continued, I fought everyone and everybody that was put on my table. Never turned down a fight in my life. Even if it was late notice, moving up in weight, short fighters, tall fighters, strong fighters, fast fighters, boxers, brawlers, etc. I fought them all.
He did.
And that's what makes what we're seeing all the more bizarre. The people that were backing Spence to destroy him...
Because that didn't happen, now they're backing Boots. Anything to get out of giving Terence Crawford his just due. Anything to get out of giving him credit, even though he deserves it.
Terence continued, I wish I could fight more than one time a year, but these guys have been running and hiding for years. Boxing's nothing like it used to be when everyone fought each other.
In the build-up of the Spence fight, one of the prevalent narratives was that Spence was doing all the heavy lifting, unifying the division, that Spence was doing all the work, when in reality, those fighters were fighting each other to get out of fighting.
Terence Crawford. They didn't want to fight him.
All that crap about cleaning up his side of the street.
Knew what you were doing. You wanted to save Terence Crawford for last if you ever got to him at all because you knew that's a much more dangerous fight than fighting Mikey Garcia and Danny Garcia and Sean Porter. Those guys weren't on Crawford's level. You knew that then. That's why you wanted to save him for last.
Because he might beat you. And he did.
Terence continued, I live in the gym, but my whole career these fighters have been running behind people saying that I'm on the wrong side of the street. Call this guy, call that guy, make it make sense. They wanted to keep everything in-house and freeze Terence Crawford out. That's how you make it make sense, and that's what happened. They sought refuge in each other from Terence Crawford.
But we've been all through that.
Terence continued, I done heard it all now. Errol Spence Jr., it's okay though, because all in all, I'm glad it's over and done with. I wish you well, my brother. And this particular tweet is grabbing a lot of people's attention because it sounds a lot like there might not be a second fight. There may not be a rematch. And if you've been following this channel long enough, you'll know that I don't want to see one. I think it's a waste of time. I don't think Errol Spence Jr. has much more to give the sport of boxing, and if he were to fight Terence Crawford for a second time, he would receive the same or worse beating than he got the first time.
Between what Terence Crawford tweeted and Spence just now getting cataract surgery, you couldn't get that surgery last year?
May have needed some time for the swelling to go down and recuperate before getting eye surgery, but he had a substantial amount of time to do that when you consider that the fight between them, that was in July. So you've got September, October, November, December.
You use August to recuperate and let the swelling go down. You get to recover. Then maybe you do the surgery later on in the year.
Seems like Errol Spence waited to do it in this one. And because he did, you have to question, in the weeks or whatever duration of time he's going to need to recover, well, he can't go in there sparring, getting ready for a fight, getting punched in the face.
No, he just had eye surgery.
Thus, there are rising suspicions that between Terence Crawford's tweet, what he said, and Errol just now getting this eye surgery, the second fight might not happen. And I'm not broken up about it at all. A second fight would have been a waste of everyone's time. Terence's time, ours, and Errol's. But for Errol,
you go in there with Terence for a second time, that's where your career dies. That's where your career is over, because he would have retired you.
It's looking like there may not be a rematch, though if there isn't one, is that to suggest that Terence is done with the PBC? Is he now free to go? And does he want to?
Or does he retire? Does he leave the sport altogether?
Terence Crawford stated, I might give y'all one more or not because y'all don't know how to appreciate greatness when you see it. It is true to some extent that Terence Crawford largely for the last 5 years has gone unappreciated in spite of being this country's most accomplished fighter. A 2-time undisputed champion, 3-division champion overall, 3-time lineal and Ring Magazine.
But he was underappreciated. I still think he is underappreciated. Look at how quickly the Spence fans moved on from Errol Spence to Jaron Boots Ennis.
That's who they're getting behind now, as if Jaron Ennis is anywhere near as accomplished and has proven as much in as many weight classes as Terence Crawford, who is now in his mid-30s. And if he's going to stick around, it's going to be for a big money fight. And that's not a Jaron Boots Ennis fight. Jaron Boots Ennis who said, you send it and I'll sign it.
But didn't Terence Crawford and Black Prime send for you already when he was over there on Black Prime and you were more focused on your relationship with Showtime, who isn't even in boxing anymore?
You blew it, and we've been all through that. Here and now, what would it take to make this fight? Who's Jaron Ennis even with at this time? Is he a network and promotional free agent? Is Terence Crawford? Because if he's not fighting Spence for a second time, who's to say that the PBC are invested in him? Outside of being all tied up with that Spence rematch, after Spence activated his rematch clause, the fight that Terence was gunning for was a Canelo Alvarez fight, all the way up there at 168. But outside of that,
let me tell you something. People are stupid. Most people are stupid and emotional.
Most boxing fans, and if you're one of these stupid and emotional people that are now getting behind Jaron Boots Ennis because Errol Spence already failed you. Errol Spence did not live up to your expectations. He didn't do what you said he was going to do. If now what you want is for Crawford to fight Jaron Boots Ennis, the most important question that needs to be asked is who's going to pay for it?
Because somebody has to.
This is prize fighting, you fucking morons. There has to be a prize. Somebody has to put up the money to make the event happen. Is that the PBC? Is Jaron Ennis with them? Is Terrence Crawford, now that he might not be fighting Spence? For these two guys to fight, someone has to pay to make it happen.
And it's not Jaron Ennis because he's waiting on Crawford to send an offer.
Unless Terrence Crawford has the PBC or somebody else behind him, how the hell is he supposed to make an offer? To my knowledge, the extent of the PBC's investment in Terrence was for a Spence fight or a Spence rematch. I don't know that they want to pay for all of his fights moving forward.
Do they want to pay for this one?
Errol Spence versus Terrence Crawford took approximately 5 years to make, and after waiting 5 years for this fight, it didn't do 1 million pay-per-view buys. It didn't do anywhere near 1 million pay-per-view buys. It did what, just north of 600,000? So what the hell do you think a fight between Terrence and Jaron Ennis is gonna draw?
Ennis doesn't have real fans. What he has are jilted Errol Spence fans angry that Errol lost. And now they're pouring their hopes into Jaron Ennis.
Case of sour grapes aside, if this is a fight you want to see, well, somebody has to pay for it. Somebody has to. Otherwise, it don't happen. And based on these two guys' situation, we don't know if Jaron Ennis is with the PBC. We don't know if he's going to go to Matchroom. As far as Terrence,
outside of the Spence fight or the Spence fights, does the PBC want to keep doing business with him?
we don't know. Making a fight between these two, immaterial and unrealistic at this time. But I may as well be saying this in Chinese to these emotional morons and mental midgets that don't seem to understand money doesn't grow on trees. And this is prize fighting. There needs to be a prize for there to be a fight.
You would understand that concept if you didn't spend so much time stealing content.
Who do you think these people are? You think they're paying for all these boxing matches, these pay-per-views that the PBC puts on? No, they're firing up their fire sticks and stealing them via illegal streams. So they can say they want Jaron Ennis versus Terrence Crawford till they're blue in the face, but they're not actually gonna pay for it. And somebody has to.
Just a bunch of degenerate bums with social media accounts. What you think doesn't matter.
Don't actually represent a unit of measure in the market because you're not a consumer. You're not a customer. You're a shoplifter.
A bum.
So who the fuck cares what you want to see? You're just gonna steal it anyway.
You fucking bum.